The morning sun cast long shadows across the Virginia coastline, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose as four black pickup trucks rolled down Highway 64. Inside each vehicle sat men whose faces bore the weight of experiences most people could never imagine. These were Navy SEALs, members of the most elite special operations force in the world, returning home from a training exercise that had pushed their bodies and minds to the absolute limit. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson sat behind the wheel of the lead truck, his calloused hands steady on the steering wheel despite the exhaustion that seeped into every muscle of his body. At 42 years old, Marcus had served his country for over 2 decades, leading countless missions in places whose names would never appear in any newspaper. His dark eyes, weathered by sand and sun and the horrors of war, scanned the highway ahead with the practiced vigilance of a man who had learned that danger could emerge from anywhere. Beside him, Lieutenant Commander Jake Harrison checked his phone for the 3rd time in as many minutes. Jake was younger than Marcus by nearly a decade, but his broad shoulders and the quiet confidence in his posture spoke to years of rigorous training and combat experience. A photograph of his wife and newborn daughter served as his phone's wallpaper, and every time he looked at it, a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "How's little Emma doing?" Marcus asked, catching the gesture from the corner of his eye. Jake's smile widened. "Growing like a weed. Sarah says she's already trying to roll over. Can you believe it? She's only 3 months old." "They grow up fast, brother. Too fast." Marcus's voice carried a hint of melancholy that Jake chose not to pursue. He knew about Marcus's divorce, about the years of missed birthdays and forgotten anniversaries that had finally driven his wife away. It was a story too common among men in their profession. Marcus had 2 children of his own, a son who was now 18 and a daughter who had just turned 16. He saw them on holidays when his schedule allowed, spoke to them on the phone when he could find a quiet moment between missions. But the distance between them grew a little more each year, a gulf of missed moments and unshared experiences that seemed impossible to bridge. His ex-wife had remarried 2 years ago to an accountant named Dave, who was home every evening for dinner, who attended every soccer game and school play, who was present in all the ways that Marcus had never managed to be. Marcus didn't resent Dave. The man made his children happy, gave them the stability they deserved. But sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, Marcus found himself wondering what his life might have been like if he had made different choices. Those thoughts were dangerous, though. He had learned long ago that dwelling on regrets was a luxury warriors couldn't afford. So he pushed them aside, focused on the road ahead, and took comfort in the knowledge that the sacrifices he had made served a purpose larger than his own happiness. In the trucks behind them, the other team members engaged in their own conversations, their voices a mixture of exhaustion and relief. Senior Chief Michael "Mikey" Rodriguez sat in the second truck, his heavily tattooed arms draped casually over the steering wheel as he listened to Petty Officer First Class David Chen recount a particularly embarrassing incident from the previous week's training. Mikey's tattoos told the story of his career, each image representing a mission, a fallen brother, a moment that had shaped him. The sleeve on his right arm depicted an American flag intertwined with an eagle, the colors vibrant despite years of sun exposure. On his left arm, names were inscribed in elegant script, a memorial to the teammates he had lost along the way. Some people thought the tattoos made him look intimidating, but Mikey saw them as a reminder of who he was and what he had been through. At 38, Mikey had served 15 years in the teams. He had been wounded 3 times, decorated twice, and had turned down multiple promotions because he preferred being in the field to sitting behind a desk. His wife, Maria, understood. She had grown up in a military family and knew what she was signing up for when they married. Their three kids, two boys and a girl, worshipped their father even if they didn't fully understand what he did for a living. "I'm telling you, Mikey, the look on the instructor's face when I came out of that water covered in seaweed was priceless," David laughed, his youthful face splitting into a grin that made him look even younger than his 28 years. "You look like the creature from the Black Lagoon," Mikey snorted. "I thought Lieutenant Commander was going to have a heart attack trying not to laugh." David Chen was the son of Chinese immigrants who had settled in San Francisco in the 1980s. His parents had worked 18-hour days in their small restaurant to put David and his two sisters through college. When David had announced his intention to join the Navy instead of pursuing the business degree they had hoped for, his father had been silent for 3 days. But on the day David graduated from BUD/S, his father had flown across the country to watch the ceremony, and the pride in his eyes had said more than words ever could. David was the team's communications specialist, a tech genius who could make any piece of equipment work under any conditions. His teammates joked that he could probably establish a satellite uplink using nothing but a paperclip and a stick of gum. But beneath the technical expertise lay a warrior's heart, fierce and unwavering when the situation demanded it. The third truck carried Petty Officers James Wilson and Tyler Brooks, two men who had been through BUD/S training together and had developed the kind of bond that only shared suffering could create. James, a tall man from Alabama with a gentle southern drawl that belied his deadly efficiency, drummed his fingers on the dashboard to the rhythm of the country song playing softly through the speakers. James had grown up on a farm outside of Birmingham, the youngest of 5 brothers who had all served in various branches of the military. His father had been a Vietnam veteran. His grandfather had stormed the beaches of Normandy. For James, military service wasn't just a career, it was a calling passed down through generations like a sacred trust. He had married his high school sweetheart, Emily, the summer before he shipped out for BUD/S. They had been together for 12 years now, and Emily was the rock that kept him grounded. She ran a small veterinary practice in Virginia Beach, healing animals, while her husband did what needed to be done in the darker corners of the world. They were expecting their first child in 3 months, and James caught himself thinking about that fact at the strangest moments. Tyler, smaller but equally formidable, stared out the window at the passing landscape, his mind already drifting toward the reunion with his girlfriend that evening. In the final truck, Master Chief Robert "Bobby" Sullivan drove in comfortable silence, his passenger seat occupied by the youngest member of their team, Petty Officer Second Class Eric Patterson. At 25, Eric was still proving himself, still earning the trust of men who had seen and done things he was only beginning to understand. Eric had joined the Navy because he had nothing else. No family to speak of. His mother had died when he was 12. His father had disappeared long before that. He had bounced through the foster system, angry and directionless, until a chance encounter with a Navy recruiter had given him a glimpse of something better. The SEALs had given him a family, a purpose, a reason to push himself beyond what he had thought possible. He still had moments of doubt, moments when he wondered if he truly belonged among these legends. But he was learning, growing, becoming something more than the abandoned kid he had once been. Bobby, at 53, was the oldest among them, a living legend whose career spanned conflicts from Panama to Afghanistan. His silver-streaked hair and the deep lines on his face told stories that his lips rarely shared. Bobby Sullivan had seen more combat than any 3 men combined. He had been part of Operation Just Cause, had fought in the First Gulf War, had conducted countless operations in places whose names remained classified. He had buried more friends than he cared to count, had written more condolence letters than anyone should ever have to write. And yet he kept going, kept serving, kept showing up when his country needed him. His wife of 31 years, Patricia, had long since accepted that Bobby would never fully retire. The seals were in his blood, woven into the very fabric of his being. She had stopped asking when he would come home for good. Instead, she treasured every moment they had together and trusted that he would return to her eventually. Their 3 daughters were grown now, one a doctor, one a lawyer, one a Marine. Bobby had missed most of their childhoods, arriving home from deployments to find them inches taller, years older, changed in ways that made his heart ache. But they had forgiven him, understood in a way that few military children ever managed. They were proud of their father, proud of his service, proud of the legacy he would someday leave behind. The convoy had been on the road for nearly 4 hours, and the fuel gauges were beginning to dip toward empty. Marcus spotted a gas station ahead, its weathered sign advertising both fuel and food, and he activated his turn signal. "Filling up at the next stop," he announced over the radio. "Everyone could probably use a break." A chorus of affirmative responses crackled through the speakers as the 4 trucks pulled off the highway and into the gravel parking lot of Martha's Gas and Grill. The establishment was a relic from another era, a family-owned business that had somehow survived the onslaught of corporate convenience stores that had swallowed so many of its peers. The paint on the building was faded but clean, and flower boxes beneath the windows added splashes of color to the otherwise utilitarian structure. The building had stood on this spot for over 40 years, built by a man named George Miller, who had served in Korea and wanted nothing more than a quiet life after his discharge. George had passed away 15 years ago, but his daughter Martha had kept the business running, determined to honor her father's memory. Martha herself had passed recently, and now the establishment was in the hands of her niece, Sarah, who had inherited both the property and the family's stubborn determination to keep it going. A faded American flag hung from a pole near the entrance, its fabric softened by years of sun and wind. Red, white, and blue bunting decorated the eaves, remnants of some long-past 4th of July celebration that no one had bothered to take down. A hand-painted sign in the window advertised the daily special, meatloaf with mashed potatoes and gravy, $4.99. The parking lot was half empty at this time of day, holding only a few civilian vehicles and an old pickup that looked like it had seen better decades. A dog of indeterminate breed lay in the shade near the ice machine, lifting its head briefly to observe the newcomers before settling back into its afternoon nap. As the men climbed out of their trucks, stretching muscles cramped from hours of driving, they attracted curious glances from the few other patrons present. Even in civilian clothes, there was something about the way these men carried themselves that set them apart. It was in the way they constantly scanned their surroundings, in the coiled readiness of their movements, in the quiet authority that radiated from their very presence. But before you continue with this incredible story, if you're enjoying the content so far, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring more stories like this one to you. Now, let's continue with what happened next at that gas station. Marcus delegated responsibilities with the efficiency of long practice. "Mikey, you and Chen take pumps 1 and 2. James, Tyler, you've got 3 and 4. Bobby, why don't you and Eric head inside, grab some snacks for the road? Jake and I will handle the last 2 trucks." The men dispersed, falling into the routine of refueling with the same precision they brought to everything else in their lives. The sound of fuel pumping and casual conversation filled the air, mingling with the distant rumble of trucks on the highway and the chirping of birds in the trees that lined the property. It was Eric who first noticed the little girl. She was standing near the corner of the building, partially hidden by an ice machine, watching them with an intensity that seemed incongruous on such a young face. Eric guessed she couldn't be more than 7 or 8 years old. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail that had seen better days, stray strands escaping to frame a face that might have been pretty if not for the smudges of dirt on her cheeks and the wary, almost haunted look in her pale blue eyes. There was something about those eyes that caught Eric off guard. They were the eyes of someone who had seen too much, understood too much, carried burdens too heavy for such small shoulders. He had seen similar eyes in war zones, in the faces of children who had grown up surrounded by violence and uncertainty, but here, in this quiet Virginia gas station, the sight was jarring. She wore clothes that were clean but worn, a faded purple t-shirt and jeans that were slightly too short for her growing legs. On her feet were sneakers that had once been white, but had long since surrendered to the inevitable accumulation of playground dirt and grass stains. In her hand, she clutched a small notebook, its cover decorated with stickers that had partially peeled away. The notebook, Eric would later learn, was where Lily kept her records. Every military vehicle that passed through Martha's Gas and Grill was documented there, make, model, license plate, any observations she deemed noteworthy. It was the work of a child trying desperately to make sense of a world that had been rendered senseless by tragedy. "Hey there," Eric called out, offering what he hoped was a friendly smile. "You okay?" The girl didn't respond. She simply continued to stare, her gaze moving from Eric to Bobby, then to the trucks beyond, as if she were cataloguing every detail for some unknown purpose. Her fingers tightened around the notebook, the knuckles going white with tension. Bobby emerged from the store, carrying 2 bags of snacks, his attention immediately drawn to the child. He had raised 3 daughters of his own, and something about this little girl triggered his paternal instincts. There was a vulnerability in her stance, a guardedness that spoke of experiences no child should have to endure. "Hello, sweetheart," Bobby said, his gruff voice softening in the way it only did around children. "Are you here with your parents?" The girl's eyes flickered to Bobby's face, then back to the trucks. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but her words carried a weight that seemed to root both men to the spot. "You need to check your trucks." Bobby and Eric exchanged confused glances. "What do you mean, honey?" Eric asked, taking a step closer. The girl didn't retreat, but her body tensed almost imperceptibly. "Check your trucks," she repeated, her voice slightly stronger this time. "Before you leave, you need to check them." There was something in her tone that prevented either man from dismissing her words as the random utterances of a child, a sense of urgency, perhaps, or the strange certainty with which she spoke. Bobby found himself studying her more closely, noting the shadows beneath her eyes that suggested sleepless nights, the way her small hands clenched and unclenched at her sides. "Okay," Bobby said slowly. "We'll check them, but can you tell me why?" The girl shook her head, a quick, almost frightened movement. "Just check, please." Before Bobby could respond, the door to the gas station opened, and a woman emerged. She was perhaps in her mid-30s, though exhaustion had carved lines into her face that made her appear older. Her hair, the same shade of blonde as the girl's, was pulled back in a hasty bun, and she wore the apron of the gas station's attached grill. "Lily!" the woman called out, her voice a mixture of relief and exasperation. "I told you to stay in the back. I'm sorry," she added, directing her attention to Bobby and Eric. "I hope she wasn't bothering you." "No bother at all, ma'am," Bobby assured her. "We were just having a conversation." The woman reached for Lily's hand, but the girl pulled away, her eyes still fixed on the trucks. "Did you tell them?" Lily asked her mother. "Did you tell them to check?" The woman's face flushed with embarrassment. "Lily, please, these men don't need you telling them what to do with their vehicles." "But, Mom—" "Lily, inside, now." For a long moment, the girl stood her ground, her small jaw set with a determination that seemed far too mature for her years. Then, with a final lingering look at the trucks, she allowed her mother to guide her toward the building. Bobby watched them go, a strange uneasiness settling in his chest. He had learned long ago to trust his instincts, and right now, every instinct he possessed was telling him that something was wrong. "What do you think that was about?" Eric asked, voicing the question that hung in the air between them. Bobby shook his head slowly. "I don't know, but I think we should do what she said." They found Marcus and Jake finishing up at the pumps, the fuel caps clicking back into place with familiar satisfaction. Bobby relayed the strange encounter, and though Marcus's first instinct was to dismiss it as the imaginative musings of a lonely child, something in Bobby's expression gave him pause. "You really think we should check the trucks?" Marcus asked. "Check them for what?" "I don't know," Bobby admitted. "But that little girl, there was something about her, Marcus, something in her eyes. I can't explain it, but I think we should listen." Jake, who'd been listening quietly, spoke up. "It couldn't hurt to do a quick once-over. We've got time." Marcus considered for a moment, then nodded. "All right, let's do it. Full inspection, everyone." The order rippled through the team, met with a mixture of curiosity and mild bemusement. Still, no one questioned it. In their world, unexpected orders were simply another part of the job, and the men went to work with practiced efficiency. They started with the standard checks. Tire pressure, fluid levels, brake lights, everything appeared normal, just as expected from vehicles that were meticulously maintained. Mikey crawled beneath his truck, flashlight in hand, scanning the undercarriage for anything out of place. David checked the engine compartment, his trained eyes searching for signs of tampering or wear. It was James who found the first anomaly. "Hey, Marcus," he called out, his voice carrying an edge of concern. "You might want to take a look at this." Marcus walked over to where James was crouched near the rear wheel of his truck. James pointed to a section of the brake line, and Marcus felt his blood run cold. The line had been nearly severed. It wasn't a clean cut. Whatever had damaged it had done so in a way that was almost invisible to a casual inspection. The cut was angled, positioned in a spot that would be easy to miss unless you knew exactly where to look. Someone had taken time and care to make this damage appear natural, the result of wear and tear rather than deliberate sabotage. It was professional work, the kind of thing that spoke to training and experience. The brake fluid had been seeping out slowly, leaving a small puddle on the gravel that could easily have been mistaken for condensation or spilled water. Marcus knelt down, his trained eye tracing the line of damage, his mind calculating what would have happened if they had continued driving. If they had hit the highway at full speed, pushed the trucks to 70 or 80 miles per hour, and then needed to brake suddenly. A chill ran down his spine that had nothing to do with the weather. He had faced death in countless forms over his career, but there was something particularly insidious about this kind of attack. It was designed to look like an accident, to leave no trace, to eliminate any evidence of foul play. Whoever had done this was a professional. "Check all the trucks," Marcus ordered, his voice sharp with urgency. "Now!" What followed was a flurry of activity as the team descended on their vehicles with the intensity they usually reserved for mission-critical operations. One by one, they discovered similar damage. Cut lines, loosened bolts, subtle sabotage that would have been virtually undetectable without a thorough inspection. Mikey found a critical bolt on his truck's steering assembly that had been backed out just enough to eventually fail. David discovered that a hydraulic line had been scored with what appeared to be a razor blade, thinning the material to the point where it would rupture under sustained pressure. Tyler found evidence that someone had tampered with his truck's suspension, creating a weakness that would cause catastrophic failure at high speeds. The damage was systematic, methodical, designed to ensure that at least one of the trucks would fail during their journey. It was the work of someone who understood vehicles intimately, who knew exactly where to strike for maximum effect while minimizing the chances of early detection. Someone had wanted them to crash. The realization settled over the group like a physical weight. These were men who had faced death in countless forms, who had stared down the barrels of enemy weapons and emerged victorious. But there was something particularly insidious about this kind of attack, something that struck at the foundations of their sense of security. "Who the hell would do this?" Tyler demanded, his normally calm demeanor cracking under the strain. "How would they even know where to find us?" "The training facility," Jake said grimly. "We were there for 3 days. Anyone watching would have seen the trucks parked outside." "But who would be watching?" David asked. "Who would have a reason to—" He trailed off, the question hanging unanswered in the air. There were too many possibilities, too many enemies accumulated over years of covert operations. It could have been anyone. Marcus forced himself to focus on the immediate situation. "We need to get these trucks towed somewhere safe, and we need to report this." "What about the girl?" Bobby asked quietly. The question brought everyone up short. In the chaos of their discovery, they had almost forgotten the catalyst that had led them to it. The little girl with the haunted eyes who had somehow known to warn them. How did she know? Eric voiced the question they were all thinking. How could she possibly have known? Marcus turned toward the gas station, where the woman and her daughter were presumably still inside. "I don't know," he said, "but I intend to find out." They found Martha's Gas and Grill to be a modest establishment, its interior reflecting the same weathered charm as its exterior. The walls were adorned with photographs spanning decades, images of smiling families and community events that spoke to the deep roots this business had planted in the local community. A long counter separated the small dining area from the kitchen, and the smell of frying bacon and fresh coffee hung in the air. The woman, her name tag identified her as Sarah, stood behind the counter, her expression a mixture of nervousness and resignation as the group of imposing men filed into her establishment. Lily was nowhere to be seen, presumably hidden away in some back room. Marcus approached the counter, deliberately softening his posture in an attempt to appear less intimidating. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to bother you, but we need to speak with you about your daughter." Sarah's hands tightened around the dish towel she was holding. "What did Lily do? I apologize if she said anything strange. She's been through a lot, and sometimes she saved our lives." The words hung in the air, and Sarah's face went pale. "What?" Marcus explained what they had found, watching as the woman's expression shifted from confusion to horror to something that looked almost like grief. When he finished, Sarah sank onto a stool behind the counter, her hands trembling. "Oh, God," she whispered. "Oh, my God." "Ma'am, Sarah, how did your daughter know to warn us?" Marcus asked gently. "How could she have known something was wrong with our trucks?" For a long moment, Sarah didn't answer. She stared at the counter, her eyes distant, lost in memories that were clearly painful. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "My husband was a mechanic, Michael. He worked at the base for 15 years, maintaining military vehicles. He was the best at what he did. Everyone said so. He could diagnose a problem just by listening to an engine, could feel when something was wrong with a vehicle the way other people feel the wind. It was a gift, he used to say, a gift he wanted to pass on." She paused, her fingers tracing patterns on the counter, the movements repetitive and unconscious. He always said that the most dangerous problems were the ones you couldn't see. The hidden flaws, the weaknesses that didn't show themselves until it was too late. He used to make Lily help him with inspections, teaching her what to look for, explaining why each component mattered. He said it was important for her to understand how things worked. Sarah's voice caught on the last words, and she took a moment to compose herself. Marcus waited, patient, understanding that some stories needed time to be told. Bobby asked softly, picking up on the past tense. Sarah's eyes filled with tears that she made no effort to hide. "He died 18 months ago, a car accident on Route 17, about 20 miles from here. The police said..." They said his brake line had been cut. The silence that followed was deafening. The men exchanged glances, laden with understanding and sympathy, the parallel too stark to ignore. "It was a Tuesday," Sarah continued, her voice breaking. "He had left for work early that morning, same as always. Kissed Lily goodbye, told her to be good for Mommy, promised to bring home ice cream for dessert. Those were the last words she ever heard him say." She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so raw and unconscious that it made several of the men look away. "The sheriff called me around noon, said there had been an accident. Said Michael had lost control on a curve, gone through the guardrail. They said he died instantly, as if that was supposed to be a comfort." "They never found who did it," Sarah continued, her voice strengthening with a bitter edge. "Michael had been asking questions about some irregularities he'd noticed at the base, vehicles coming in for repairs that had already been tampered with, maintenance records that didn't match what he was seeing. He reported it to his supervisor, filed paperwork with the safety office. He was doing everything by the book because that's who Michael was. He believed in the system." She laughed bitterly. 2 weeks later, he was dead. Marcus felt a cold fury building in his chest. Did anyone investigate? The military police looked into it. They said they couldn't find any evidence of foul play at the base. The local sheriff ruled it an accident, said Michael must have hit some road debris that damaged the line. She laughed bitterly. Michael spent 20 years working on cars. He would have known if something was wrong with his own vehicle. Someone killed him, and no one cared enough to find out who. "We care," Jake said, his voice firm with conviction. Sarah looked up at him, hope and skepticism warring on her face. "You're the first ones to say that since he died." "Your daughter," Marcus said, steering the conversation back. "You said she helped him with inspections. Is that how she knew to warn us?" "After Michael died, Lily, she changed. She used to be such a happy child, always laughing, always playing. But since then," Sarah wiped at her eyes, "she barely speaks anymore. She has nightmares almost every night. And whenever she sees military vehicles, she gets this look in her eyes, like she's terrified, like she's waiting for it to happen again." "She checks them," Sarah continued. "Any military vehicle that comes through here, she watches it, studies it. Sometimes she'll slip outside and look at them up close. I've tried to stop her, tried to explain that she can't keep doing this, but she won't listen. She says she has to make sure. She says she won't let what happened to her daddy happen to anyone else." The weight of this revelation settled over the group like a physical presence. This little girl, this child who had experienced unimaginable loss, had made it her personal mission to prevent others from suffering the same fate. And today, that mission had saved their lives. "Where is she?" Bobby asked. "We'd like to thank her." Sarah hesitated, then nodded toward a door at the back of the restaurant. "She's in the storage room. She goes there when she's upset. I'll get her." A few minutes later, Lily emerged from the back, her small hand clutched tightly in her mother's. She looked even smaller than she had outside, dwarfed by the rows of shelves stacked with supplies. Her eyes were red-rimmed, as if she had been crying. Bobby knelt down so he was at eye level with her, his worn face softening into something approaching tenderness. "Lily, my name is Bobby. These are my friends. We want to thank you for what you did today." Lily's eyes darted nervously from face to face, not quite meeting anyone's gaze. "You checked your trucks?" she asked in a small voice. "We did, and we found some problems, bad problems that could have hurt us. You saved our lives, Lily." For a moment, something flickered in the girl's eyes, a spark of something that might have been pride or relief or hope, but it was quickly buried beneath layers of grief and wariness. "I didn't want you to get hurt," she said simply, "like Daddy." Marcus stepped forward, crouching down beside Bobby. "Lily, we're very sorry about your daddy. We understand he was a good man and that he taught you well. What you did today was incredibly brave." I'm not brave, Lily whispered. I'm scared all the time. That's what makes you brave, Marcus said gently. Being scared and doing the right thing anyway. That's the bravest thing anyone can do. Lily looked at him for a long moment, her pale blue eyes searching his face, as if trying to determine whether he was telling the truth. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Phone calls were made, reports were filed, and arrangements were set in motion to have the trucks safely transported to a secure facility for forensic analysis. Local law enforcement arrived, followed shortly by military investigators whose presence carried an air of serious intent. Throughout it all, the team remained at the gas station, unwilling to leave until they knew that Sarah and Lily would be safe. There was no evidence that whoever had sabotaged their trucks even knew about the girl who had discovered their handiwork, but these men had learned long ago that it was better to be cautious. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus found himself standing outside the gas station, watching as the last of the tow trucks disappeared down the highway. Jake approached, 2 cups of coffee in hand, and offered one to his friend. "Hell of a day," Jake observed. "That's one word for it." Marcus accepted the coffee, wrapping his hands around the warm cup. "Someone tried to kill us, Jake. Someone who had access to our vehicles, who knew where we'd be." "I know. The investigators are going to tear the base apart looking for answers." Jake paused, taking a sip of his coffee. "What about Michael, Sarah's husband?" "I've already made some calls. I've got friends who can dig into the original investigation, see if anything was missed." Marcus's jaw tightened. "If someone murdered that man and covered it up, I intend to find out." "And the family? Sarah and Lily?" Marcus turned to look back at the gas station, where Bobby was visible through the window, sitting at a table with Lily. The big man was showing her something on his phone. Pictures of his grandchildren, probably. For the first time that day, the ghost of a smile played at the corners of the girl's lips. "We take care of them," Marcus said firmly. "Whatever they need, for as long as they need it. That little girl saved our lives. We owe her a debt that we can never fully repay." "The others feel the same way," Jake said. "Mikey's already talking about setting up a fund for her education. David wants to see if he can pull some strings, get her into a grief counseling program he heard about." Marcus nodded, unsurprised. These men might be trained killers, honed into weapons by years of brutal training and combat experience. But beneath that hardened exterior lay hearts that were capable of profound compassion. It was one of the contradictions of their profession, the capacity for violence existing alongside an equally strong capacity for protection and care. The sun was beginning to set by the time the investigators finished their preliminary work and departed. The team gathered in the small dining area of Martha's Grill, nursing cups of coffee and plates of food that Sarah had insisted on preparing for them. Lily sat among them, no longer hiding in the shadows, but tentatively joining their circle. It was Bobby who broke the contemplative silence. "You know what I've been thinking about? Michael, Sarah's husband. The man taught his daughter everything he knew. He made sure she understood how to protect herself and others. Even after he was gone, his lessons saved lives." "He sounds like a good man," Tyler said quietly. "The best kind," Bobby agreed. "The kind who prepares the next generation to carry on the fight." He looked at Lily, who was watching him with those old, wise eyes. "Your daddy would be proud of you today, sweetheart. I hope you know that." For a moment, Lily's composure cracked. Her lower lip trembled and tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back with a determination that seemed to go beyond her years. "I miss him," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Every day I miss him." "I know," Bobby said, "and you're going to miss him for a long time, maybe forever, but that doesn't mean you're alone. Your daddy left you with something special, something no one can ever take away. He left you with knowledge and courage and the desire to help people. That's a legacy that most people would be lucky to have. Sarah, who had been listening from behind the counter, wiped at her eyes with the corner of her apron. He really would be proud, she said, her voice catching. Every time I see her checking those vehicles, part of me wants to make her stop. But another part knows that it's her way of keeping him alive, of honoring what he stood for. It's more than that now, Marcus said. What she does, what she did for us, it matters. It matters more than she could possibly know. As the evening deepened and the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the team faced the practical question of transportation. With their trucks being held as evidence, they were effectively stranded. Phone calls were made, and within the hour, a military transport was dispatched to collect them. But before they left, there was one more thing to be done. Marcus gathered the team outside, away from the gas station where Sarah and Lily were cleaning up from the day's unexpected events. He looked at each of his men in turn, seeing the same resolve reflected in their eyes. "What happened today changes things," he said. "We all know that. Someone out there wanted us dead, and they almost succeeded. But they failed because of a little girl who refused to let her father's death be in vain." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I want us to make a promise, here now, to each other. We're going to find out who did this, both to us and to Michael. We're going to bring them to justice, and we're going to make damn sure that Sarah and Lily are taken care of for as long as they need." One by one, the men nodded their agreement. It wasn't a formal vow, nothing that would be written down or spoken of publicly. But among men like these, a promise given was a promise kept. There was no higher commitment. They returned to the gas station to say their goodbyes. Sarah met them at the door, her eyes still red from crying, but her back straight and her chin lifted. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, "for believing us, for caring." "Thank your daughter," Marcus replied. "She's the hero today." He turned to Lily, who stood partially hidden behind her mother's legs. "Lily, I want you to remember something. What you did today was important. You trusted your instincts and you spoke up even when it was scary. That makes you braver than most adults I know." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a challenge coin, a time-honored tradition among military units, a symbol of brotherhood and respect. The coin was weathered from years of handling, its edges smoothed by countless fingers. On one side was the sealed trident, on the other a simple inscription, "The only easy day was yesterday." "This is yours now," Marcus said, pressing the coin into Lily's small palm. "It's something we give to people we respect, people who have proven their courage. You've more than earned it." Lily stared at the coin as if it were the most precious thing she had ever seen. Her fingers closed around it tightly, and when she looked up at Marcus, there were tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll keep it forever." One by one, the other team members approached to offer their own goodbyes. Bobby knelt down to give Lily a gentle hug, his gruff exterior completely dissolved in the presence of this remarkable child. Mikey pressed a piece of paper into Sarah's hand. "A phone number," he explained, "that she could call if she ever needed anything at all." David presented Lily with a small stuffed animal that he had purchased from a rack near the register, a brown teddy bear wearing a tiny navy shirt. "Every hero needs a sidekick," he said with a wink. Eric, the youngest of the group, hung back slightly, unsure of what to say. But when Lily turned to him, he managed a smile that carried more warmth than he would have thought himself capable of. "You're going to do great things," he told her. "I can tell." As the military transport pulled into the parking lot, its headlights cutting through the gathering darkness, the team made their final farewells. Sarah stood in the doorway of her establishment, her arm around her daughter's shoulders, watching as the men who had come into her life so unexpectedly climbed into the vehicle. Just before Marcus stepped aboard, Lily broke away from her mother and ran across the parking lot. She threw her arms around his waist, her face buried in his jacket, her small body trembling with emotion. "Please find out who hurt my daddy," she said, her voice muffled against the fabric. "Please!" Marcus knelt down, placing his hands on her shoulders so he could look directly into her eyes. "I promise you, Lily. I promise on my honor, on everything I believe in, we will find the truth, and we will make sure that justice is done." Lily held his gaze for a long moment, searching for any sign of deception or empty platitude. What she found instead was the unwavering commitment of a man who had dedicated his life to protecting others. "Okay," she said finally, "I believe you." The transport pulled away from the gas station, carrying the team into the night. Through the rear window, they could see Sarah and Lily still standing in the parking lot, two figures silhouetted against the lights of the building behind them. No one spoke for a long time. There were no words adequate for the emotions that filled the vehicle: gratitude, anger, determination, and a profound sense of purpose that transcended their usual missions. It was Tyler who finally broke the silence. "So," he said quietly, "where do we start?" "At the beginning," Marcus replied. "We go back to where Michael worked. We talk to everyone who knew him, everyone who might have seen something. We examine every piece of evidence from his death, no matter how insignificant it might seem." "And the sabotage on our trucks?" James asked. "That's connected. It has to be. The methods are too similar, the timing too convenient. Whoever killed Michael is still operating, still targeting military vehicles." "Why?" David wondered. "What's the endgame?" "That's what we're going to find out." Marcus's voice was hard with resolve. "Whoever these people are, they made two mistakes. First, they underestimated a grieving little girl who refused to stop fighting. And second, they came after us." He looked around at his team, seeing the same fire burning in each of their eyes. They've woken something up that they're going to wish they'd let sleep. The weeks that followed were consumed by investigation. While the official military inquiry ground through its bureaucratic processes, the SEAL team conducted their own parallel investigation, leveraging contacts and calling in favors accumulated over years of service. Marcus reached out to friends in military intelligence, men and women who had worked alongside him in operations that would never be officially acknowledged. Jake used his connections in the Pentagon to access records that were supposed to be restricted. Bobby called in debts from a career that spanned 3 decades, asking questions that no one in official channels seemed willing to answer. They worked in shifts, coordinating their efforts through encrypted channels and secure communications. Each man contributed according to his strengths. David handled the technical analysis, Mikey worked the human intelligence angle, James and Tyler conducted physical surveillance when needed. Eric, eager to prove himself, took on whatever tasks needed doing, from reviewing financial records to making coffee at 3 in the morning. The gas station became their unofficial headquarters. Sarah cleared out a storage room and offered it as a meeting space, grateful for both the company and the purpose. Lily hovered at the edges, listening, learning, occasionally offering insights that the adults had overlooked. She knew her father's work better than anyone, understood his methods and his concerns. More than once, her observations pointed the investigation in a new direction. What they found was disturbing. Michael's suspicions had been correct. Someone within the military vehicle maintenance system had been systematically sabotaging equipment for years. Not enough to be obvious, not enough to create immediate disasters, but enough to create vulnerabilities that could be exploited at precisely the right moment. The operation was sophisticated, carefully compartmentalized to prevent any single point of failure from exposing the whole network. Each saboteur knew only their piece of the puzzle, Following instructions passed through anonymous channels and dead drops, the coordination suggested military training, possibly intelligence background. Whoever was running this operation understood operational security at a level that made Marcus deeply uneasy. The trail led through a labyrinth of contractors, subcontractors, and shadowy intermediaries. It touched corners of the military-industrial complex that most people didn't even know existed. Shell companies registered in offshore jurisdictions, payments routed through multiple banks, personnel records that seemed to disappear into bureaucratic black holes. And at its heart was a small group of individuals who had been selling their services to the highest bidder: foreign governments, domestic terrorists, anyone willing to pay for the ability to cripple American military vehicles at a time of their choosing. The implications were staggering. If this network had been operating for years, how many accidents had actually been sabotage? How many vehicles had failed at critical moments, their failures attributed to mechanical error or driver mistake? How many soldiers had died or been injured because of vulnerabilities deliberately introduced into their equipment? Michael had stumbled onto this operation by accident, his mechanic's instincts alerting him to anomalies that others had missed or ignored. When he had started asking questions, he had become a liability. And liabilities in the world of covert operations and black market dealings were dealt with permanently. The SEAL team gathered their evidence meticulously, building a case that would be impossible to ignore or dismiss. They worked in the shadows, using skills honed by years of covert operations. Every document was verified through multiple sources. Every witness was carefully vetted. Every piece of evidence was preserved according to legal standards that would hold up in court. And when they finally had enough, they brought it to people they trusted, senior officials who were beyond corruption, investigators who had proven their integrity. Marcus personally delivered the preliminary findings to a two-star admiral he had served under decades earlier, a man whose reputation for honesty was beyond question. The admiral's face had gone pale as he reviewed the materials, and his hands had trembled with rage as he picked up the phone to set the operation in motion. The arrests came on a cold morning in late November. 12 individuals were taken into custody, including 3 military personnel, 5 contractors, and 4 civilians with connections to foreign intelligence services. The operation made national news, though the full details were classified to protect ongoing investigations and sensitive sources. The media called it one of the largest military espionage rings uncovered in decades. Talking heads debated the implications on cable news, politicians demanded hearings, and the Pentagon launched a comprehensive review of vehicle maintenance procedures across all branches. But for the families who had lost loved ones to accidents that were now being investigated as potential homicides, the coverage was both vindicating and painful, proof that their doubts had been justified, but also a reminder of all that had been lost. Among those arrested was a man named Victor Chen, no relation to David, a former military intelligence officer who had been running the operation for nearly a decade. During his interrogation, he showed no remorse, no regret for the lives he had endangered or ended. He spoke of his work in clinical terms, as if discussing a business venture that had simply gone wrong. When asked about Michael, he had shrugged. He was a loose end. Loose ends get tied up, nothing personal. Marcus had to leave the observation room when he heard that. He had stood in the hallway, fists clenched, forcing himself to breathe slowly and evenly until the urge to break through the one-way glass had passed. Through it all, the team maintained their connection with Sarah and Lily. Bobby visited whenever he could, bringing small gifts and spending hours talking with the girl who had saved his life. Marcus checked in regularly, keeping Sarah informed of the investigation's progress without revealing details that might put them at risk. When the arrests were finally made, it was Marcus who delivered the news in person. He drove the 5 hours to Martha's Gas and Grill, arriving just as the sun was setting, the same time of day when they had first pulled in for what they thought would be a routine fuel stop. The drive had given him time to think, time to process everything that had happened over the past months. He thought about Michael, a man he had never met but felt he had come to know through the stories Sarah and Lily shared. He thought about the courage it had taken for Michael to speak up, to challenge a system that would ultimately turn against him. He thought about the terrible price that courage had extracted. And he thought about Lily, the little girl who had inherited her father's gift for seeing what others missed, his stubborn determination to do what was right. She had lost her father, but she had refused to let his death be meaningless. In her own small way, she had carried on his fight. The parking lot was quiet when Marcus pulled in, the evening rush long since past. A few moths circled the lights above the pumps, their wings casting flickering shadows on the concrete. The smell of gasoline and fried food hung in the air, familiar now after so many visits. Sarah was behind the counter when he walked in, her face lit up with recognition. "Marcus, we weren't expecting you." "I have news," he said simply. "Is Lily here?" Something in his tone must have conveyed the significance of the moment. Sarah's expression shifted from surprise to hope, a fragile, trembling hope that she seemed almost afraid to acknowledge. She called for her daughter, and a moment later, Lily appeared from the back room. She was wearing a new purple shirt, a gift from one of the team members, and the challenge coin Marcus had given her hung on a chain around her neck. She had grown in the months since their first meeting, not just physically, but in confidence and presence. The haunted look that had once dominated her features was still there, but it had receded, making room for something brighter. "Hi, Marcus," she said, a genuine smile crossing her face. It was a smile that appeared more frequently now, Bobby had reported, a sign of healing that filled them all with hope. "Hi, sweetheart, I came to tell you something important." Marcus knelt down to her level, meeting her eyes directly. He wanted to make sure she understood, wanted her to see the sincerity in his face. "We found them, Lily, the people who hurt your daddy. They're going to prison for a very long time." For a moment, Lily stood perfectly still. Her expression didn't change, didn't waver. She simply stood there, processing the words that she had waited so long to hear. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, something shifted in her eyes. The walls she had built to protect herself, the barriers she had erected against hope and disappointment, began to crumble. Her lower lip trembled. Her pale blue eyes filled with tears, not tears of sadness this time, but tears of relief, of vindication, of the release of a weight that had pressed down on her young shoulders for far too long. She threw herself into Marcus's arms, sobbing against his chest. "Thank you," she choked out between tears. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Marcus held her tightly, his own eyes burning with emotion he rarely allowed himself to show. "No, Lily, thank you. You started all of this. You believed when no one else would. You kept fighting when everyone told you to stop. Your daddy's memory lived through you, and because of that, justice was finally done." Sarah had collapsed onto a stool, her hands covering her face as she wept. Marcus looked up at her, saw the 18 months of grief and frustration and desperate hope finally finding release. "It's over," he told her. "Michael's death wasn't in vain. Because of him, because of what he taught Lily, dozens of lives were saved, maybe hundreds when you count all the sabotage that's been prevented." "How can I ever repay you?" Sarah asked, her voice thick with emotion. "You already have," Marcus replied. "You raised an incredible daughter. That's more than enough." In the months that followed, the gas station became something of an unofficial gathering place for the SEAL team. Whenever they passed through the area, they would stop in, checking on Sarah and Lily, sharing meals and stories, and the easy camaraderie of people bound together by extraordinary circumstances. Lily flourished under their attention. The haunted look gradually faded from her eyes, replaced by a brightness that had been missing since her father's death. She started smiling more, laughing more, engaging with the world in ways that her mother had feared she might never do again. The team took her under their collective wing, teaching her things that went beyond the mechanical knowledge her father had imparted. Bobby taught her about resilience, about the strength that comes from surviving tragedy. Marcus taught her about justice, about the importance of standing up for what's right, even when the odds seem impossible. The others contributed their own lessons about loyalty, about courage, about the value of community and connection. On the 1-year anniversary of the day they had met, the team returned to Martha's Gas and Grill for a celebration. The parking lot was filled with trucks, different trucks now, clean and safe and unsabotaged, and the small restaurant overflowed with laughter and conversation. Sarah had spent days preparing for the event, cooking enough food to feed an army, which, in a sense, she was. The menu included all of Lily's favorites: fried chicken, macaroni and cheese, cornbread, and a chocolate cake decorated with purple frosting and gold stars. Purple had become Lily's favorite color, the team had learned, because it was the color of the shirt she had been wearing the day they met. A banner hung across the wall, hand-painted in bright colors by Lily herself. "Happy anniversary, Lily." The girl herself sat at the center of attention, surrounded by men who had become like uncles to her, wearing a smile that stretched from ear to ear. The challenge coin still hung around her neck, but it had been joined by other tokens, small symbols of respect and affection from each member of the team. Bobby had given her a compass, explaining that it would always help her find her way. Jake had presented her with a children's book about famous female pilots and astronauts. Mikey had commissioned a small portrait of Michael, working from photographs Sarah had provided, which now hung in a place of honor in Lily's bedroom. The party had been going for several hours, the laughter and conversation flowing as freely as the sweet tea and lemonade. Stories were shared, some appropriate for young ears, others edited on the fly when the storyteller remembered that children were present. Lily listened with rapt attention, occasionally asking questions that revealed a mind far more sophisticated than her years would suggest. Marcus stood to offer a toast, raising his glass of sweet tea. Alcohol wasn't served at Martha's, a policy that the men respected without complaint. The room fell quiet, all eyes turning to the man who had led them through this unexpected journey. 1 year ago today, he began, we pulled into this parking lot expecting nothing more than a tank of gas and maybe a bathroom break. Instead, we found something much more valuable. We found a hero. He looked at Lily, his eyes soft with affection. This little girl taught us something important. She taught us that courage isn't about how big you are or how much training you have. It's about listening to your heart, trusting your instincts, and speaking up even when you're scared. He raised his glass higher. To Lily, the bravest person I know. "To Lily!" the others echoed, their voices filling the small space with warmth and affection. Lily ducked her head, embarrassed by the attention, but unable to hide her pleasure. Then she stood up, holding her own glass of lemonade, and cleared her throat. "I want to say something," she announced, her voice clear and strong, so different from the frightened whisper of a year ago. "My daddy always told me that the best thing you can do in life is help other people. He said that when you see something wrong, you have to speak up, even if it's scary, even if people don't believe you." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each person present. "When my daddy died, I was really, really angry and really, really sad. I didn't understand why someone would hurt him. I didn't understand why no one would help us find the truth. Her voice wavered slightly, but she pressed on. Then you came, and you listened to me, you believed me, you kept your promise. Tears were streaming down her face now, but she made no move to wipe them away. My daddy can't be here today, but I know he's watching, and I know he's proud, not just of me, but of all of you, because you're the kind of people he always believed in, the kind who stand up for what's right, the kind who protect others. She raised her glass. To my daddy, and to all of you, my family. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down and the guests began to drift away, Marcus found himself standing outside the gas station, looking up at the stars. The air was cool and clear, carrying the distant sounds of the highway and the closer sounds of his team saying their prolonged goodbyes. Bobby came to stand beside him, two men shaped by war finding peace in a moment of stillness. Hell of a year, Bobby observed, echoing Jake's words from 12 months earlier. That's one word for it. Marcus smiled slightly. You know, when I think about all the operations we've run, all the missions we've completed, this is the one I'm most proud of. Because we caught the bad guys? Because we helped a little girl believe in people again. Marcus turned to look through the window where Lily was helping her mother clean up the remains of the party. She was so broken when we met her, so lost. Now look at her. She's going to be okay, Bobby said with certainty. More than okay. That kid's got a fire in her that's going to change the world someday. I believe it. Marcus paused, then added, What do you think Michael would say if he could see all this? Bobby considered the question. I think he'd say thank you for finishing what he started, for taking care of his girls. He chuckled softly, and probably something about checking our tire pressure before we leave. Marcus laughed, a genuine, full laugh that came from somewhere deep inside. Yeah, he probably would. Inside the gas station, Lily had finished helping with the cleanup and was now pressing her face against the window, watching the two men outside. Sarah came to stand beside her, placing a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. Oh, what are you thinking about, sweetheart? Lily was quiet for a moment, her eyes reflecting the stars above. I'm thinking about Daddy, about how he always said that good people find each other. That if you do the right thing, the right people will come into your life. He was a wise man, your father. Yeah. Lily turned to look up at her mother, and in her eyes was something that Sarah hadn't seen in far too long. Hope. Pure, undiluted hope. Mom, I think I want to be like them when I grow up. I want to help people. I want to protect them. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I think that's a wonderful dream, baby. Your daddy would be so proud. I know. Lily looked back out the window, watching as Marcus and Bobby shook hands and then embraced in the way that men who have shared profound experiences embrace, without shame, without reservation. I know he would. The trucks pulled out one by one, their headlights cutting paths through the darkness. Sarah and Lily stood in the doorway, waving goodbye, their figures growing smaller in the rearview mirrors of men who would never forget them. And as the last truck disappeared around the bend in the highway, Lily reached up to touch the challenge coin around her neck. The metal was warm from her body heat, smooth from constant handling. On one side, she could feel the raised outline of the sealed trident. On the other, the words that had become her motto. The only easy day was yesterday. It was true, she thought. Every day brought new challenges, new obstacles, new fears to overcome. But it also brought new opportunities to learn, to grow, to help others, to make a difference. Her father was gone, but his legacy lived on. In the lessons he had taught her, in the courage he had instilled in her, in the love that would never fade no matter how many years passed. And in the family she had found in the most unexpected of places, a family forged not by blood, but by something even stronger, by shared experience, by mutual respect, by the unbreakable bond between people who had looked into the darkness together and emerged into the light. Lily smiled as she turned to go back inside, her mother's hand warm in her own. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for tonight she was content to rest in the knowledge that she was loved, that she was valued, that she had made a difference. And somewhere out there, driving through the night toward homes and families of their own, 11 men carried with them the memory of a little girl who had taught them that heroes come in all sizes. The next morning, Sarah woke to find Lily already up, sitting at the kitchen table with a notebook and pen. The early morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow over the scene. "What are you working on, sweetheart?" Sarah asked, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "I'm writing a letter," Lily replied without looking up. "To Daddy. I want to tell him about everything that happened." Sarah felt her heart clench, but the pain was gentler now, tempered by time and healing. "That's a beautiful idea, baby. What are you telling him?" Lily was quiet for a moment, her pen moving steadily across the paper. Then she looked up, her pale blue eyes bright with something that looked remarkably like peace. "I'm telling him that I understand now, why he taught me all those things, why it was so important to him that I knew how to spot problems, how to speak up, how to be brave." She smiled, a smile that reminded Sarah so powerfully of Michael that it took her breath away. "And I'm telling him that I'm going to keep going, keep watching, keep protecting people. Because that's what he would have wanted." "Oh, Lily!" Sarah crossed to the table and wrapped her arms around her daughter, holding her close. "He would be so proud of you, so incredibly proud." "I know, Mom." Lily returned the embrace, her small arms surprisingly strong. "I know." 3 years later, on a warm spring afternoon, Marcus Thompson stood in the audience of a middle school auditorium, watching a ceremony that he had traveled 500 miles to attend. Beside him stood Bobby, Jake, Mikey, David, Tyler, James, and Eric, the full team, reassembled for an occasion none of them would have missed for the world. On the stage, a girl who was no longer quite so little stepped up to accept an award. At 11 years old, Lily had grown tall for her age, her blonde hair now falling past her shoulders, her bearing confident and assured. The challenge coin still hung around her neck, a constant companion through the years. The award was for community service, recognizing Lily's work organizing a program that taught local children about vehicle safety. What had started as a school project had grown into something much larger, spreading to schools throughout the county and attracting attention from state officials and national safety organizations. "And the Youth Citizenship Award goes to Lily Thompson," the principal announced. The applause that followed was thunderous, but no one clapped harder than the group of military men in the back row. They had watched Lily transform over the years, had supported her through challenges, and celebrated her achievements. They had become, in every way that mattered, part of her family. Lily approached the microphone, her speech prepared, but her nerves under control. She had learned long ago that being nervous was okay. It was what you did despite the nerves that counted. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady and clear. "This award means so much to me, but it really belongs to everyone who supported me along the way. My mom, who never stopped believing in me, my friends who helped with the program, and my dad." She paused, touching the coin at her neck. "My dad was a mechanic. He worked on military vehicles for 15 years. He taught me everything he knew about how machines work, about what to look for, about why it matters. He died when I was 7, but his lessons saved lives, and they're still saving lives today." She looked out at the audience, finding the familiar faces in the back row. "I also want to thank some very special people. A few years ago, I met a group of Navy SEALs at my mom's gas station. They were just passing through, but something told me to warn them to check their trucks. They listened, and because they listened, they found something that could have hurt them very badly." The audience murmured, many of them hearing this story for the first time. The SEALs shifted uncomfortably, unused to public attention, but they didn't look away. Those men didn't have to care about a scared little girl and her mom. They didn't have to investigate what happened to my dad. They didn't have to keep coming back year after year to check on us and support us. But they did, because that's who they are. They're protectors, and they taught me that being a protector isn't about how strong you are or how much training you have. It's about caring. It's about paying attention. It's about speaking up when something's wrong. She lifted her chin, her eyes shining with emotion, but her voice unwavering. So this award isn't just for me. It's for my dad, who gave me the tools I needed. It's for my mom, who gave me the strength to keep going. And it's for the men in the back row, my uncles in everything but blood, who showed me that heroes are real, and that sometimes heroes come when you need them most. The applause that followed was overwhelming. Sarah, seated in the front row, was openly weeping. The SEALs maintained their composure, but if one looked closely, one might have noticed an unusual brightness in their eyes. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed and families gathered for photographs, Lily made her way to the back of the auditorium where her military family waited. "You've gotten tall," Bobby observed, his gruff voice thick with emotion. "You've gotten grey," Lily shot back, grinning. "Grey? This is silver, thank you very much. Distinguished silver." Bobby pulled her into a bear hug that lifted her feet off the ground. "I'm proud of you, kid. So damn proud." One by one, the others offered their congratulations. Marcus held back until last, watching the interactions with a satisfaction that went beyond words. When Lily finally reached him, she didn't say anything at first. She just looked at him with those pale blue eyes that had changed so much and yet remained fundamentally the same. Still watchful, still perceptive, still carrying that spark of determination that had saved their lives all those years ago. "Thank you," she said finally, "for everything." "You did the work," Marcus replied. "We just showed up." "You showed up when no one else would. You believed when no one else would. That's everything, Marcus. That's everything." Marcus felt the emotion he usually kept so carefully controlled, threatening to break through. He cleared his throat, buying time to compose himself. "You know what I think about sometimes," he said. "I think about what would have happened if we hadn't stopped at that gas station. If we had chosen a different exit, a different route, we'd be dead, all of us. Just another tragic accident on a highway somewhere." "But you did stop," Lily said, "and I was there, and we found each other." "Fate," Bobby interjected. "Your father would have called it fate." "My father would have called it a mechanical inevitability based on fuel consumption rates and average driving distances," Lily corrected with a smile. "But I like to think that maybe he had something to do with it. Maybe he pointed us all in the right direction." Marcus nodded slowly. "Maybe he did. Either way, I'm grateful, more grateful than I can say." Sarah approached the group, her face still streaked with tears, but her smile radiant. "Are you all coming to the house? I've got food ready. Probably too much food, as usual." "Wouldn't miss it," Jake assured her. "Though fair warning, I've been telling Eric stories about the last time we had your cooking. He might have to be rolled out the door." The group laughed, the easy laughter of people who had become family. As they made their way out of the auditorium and into the warm spring afternoon, Lily fell into step beside Marcus, her hand finding his with an ease born of years of trust. "Marcus, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever regret it? Getting involved, I mean. Taking on all that risk, all that trouble, just because a scared little girl told you to check your trucks?" Marcus stopped walking, turning to face her directly. The others continued ahead, giving them space, as if sensing that this moment was important. "Lily, listen to me carefully. What happened that day, meeting you, learning about your father, everything that followed, it's the proudest chapter of my entire career. Not the medals or the commendations or the successful missions. This, you, what you've become, what you're going to become. He placed his hands on her shoulders, looking into her eyes with an intensity that conveyed the depth of his sincerity. I've spent my whole life protecting people. It's what I was trained to do, what I was built for. But you taught me something I didn't know I needed to learn. You taught me that protection goes both ways, that sometimes the people we're trying to save end up saving us. Lily's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I love you, Uncle Marcus. You know that, right? I know. He pulled her into a hug, feeling the young woman she was becoming, even as he remembered the frightened child she had been. Her arms wrapped around him with a strength that surprised him, and for a long moment, they simply held each other. You changed my life, Lily whispered into his jacket. All of you. I was so scared and so angry and so lost. And then you came, and you showed me that good people still existed, that the world wasn't as broken as I thought it was. Marcus's eyes burned with emotion he usually kept so carefully controlled. He thought of all the missions he had completed, all the objectives he had achieved, all the enemies he had defeated. None of them compared to this, to knowing that he had made a difference in the life of one small girl, that he had helped her find her way back from the darkness. You showed us something too, he said, his voice rough. You showed us that courage isn't about how big you are or how much training you have. It's about the choices you make, the stands you take, the voices you raise when everyone else is silent. He pulled back, holding her at arm's length so he could look into her eyes. Don't ever lose that, Lily. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you're too young or too small or too anything to make a difference. You've already proven them wrong. Lily nodded solemnly, her expression carrying a maturity that belied her years. I won't forget, she promised. I'll never forget. They stayed like that for a long moment. Two people bound by something stronger than blood, stronger than circumstance, stronger than time itself. Then, by unspoken agreement, they separated and continued toward the parking lot where the others waited. The afternoon sun was warm on their faces. The sounds of celebration drifted from the school behind them, and ahead, a house full of food and family and laughter awaited. It was, Lily thought, exactly what her father would have wanted. That evening, as the party wound down and the Seals prepared to leave, Lily stood in the driveway, watching them load into their vehicles. The trucks were different from the ones that had pulled into her mother's gas station all those years ago, but the men inside were the same, older now, some of them retired, but still bound by the brotherhood that defined their lives. Bobby was the last to go. He stood beside his truck, keys in hand, looking at Lily with an expression that mixed pride and sadness in equal measure. You know, he said, when I first saw you that day, hiding behind the ice machine, looking at us like we might be the enemy, I never could have imagined all this. Never in a million years. What did you imagine? Lily asked. Bobby shrugged. Honestly, I thought you were just a scared kid who had seen too many action movies. I figured we'd do a quick check of the trucks to humor you, find nothing, and be on our way. But you checked anyway. Yeah, Bobby smiled, a smile that transformed his weathered face. I checked anyway. Best decision I ever made. He opened his truck door, then paused. Lily, I want you to remember something. No matter where life takes you, no matter what challenges you face, you've got a whole team of people who will always have your back. All you have to do is call. I know, Lily said. That's what family is for. Bobby nodded, his throat too tight for words. He climbed into his truck, started the engine, and pulled out of the driveway. As he drove away, he watched in the rearview mirror as Lily raised her hand in a final wave, a gesture that was both goodbye and promise. The road stretched out before him, disappearing into the gathering dusk. In a few hours, he would be home with his wife and grandchildren. In a few weeks, he would be back for another visit, another meal, another chapter in the ongoing story of their makeshift family. But for now, he drove in silence, thinking about fate and chance and the mysterious forces that bring people together. About a mechanic named Michael who had tried to do the right thing and paid for it with his life. About a little girl who had refused to let his sacrifice be in vain. And about the strange, beautiful, utterly unpredictable journey that had led them all to this moment. His phone buzzed. A text message from Marcus. "Safe travels, old man. See you next month." Bobby smiled and drove on into the night. Back at the house, Lily helped her mother finish cleaning up. The dishes were washed, the leftovers stored, the tables cleared. As they worked, mother and daughter fell into the easy rhythm of people who have shared both tragedy and triumph, who have learned to find joy in simple moments. "You did good today," Sarah said as they wiped down the last of the counters. "Your speech was beautiful." "I meant every word." "I know you did. That's what made it beautiful." Sarah hung up her dish towel and turned to face her daughter. "Your father would have been amazed by who you've become, the program you've built, the lives you've touched. It's beyond anything he could have imagined." "I think he imagined it," Lily said quietly. "I think he saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself, and he spent whatever time he had trying to bring it out." Sarah nodded, her eyes glistening. "He always believed in you. From the moment you were born, he believed." They stood in the clean kitchen, the house quiet around them, the echoes of laughter and conversation fading into memory. Outside, the stars were beginning to emerge, pinpoints of light in an endless sky. "Mom, can I go outside for a minute?" "Of course, sweetheart." Lily stepped out onto the back porch, feeling the cool evening air on her face. She walked to the edge of the yard, where a small garden bench sat beneath an old oak tree. Her father had built that bench, she remembered, one of many projects he had undertaken in the few years they had together. She sat down, her hands finding the smooth wood worn by years of weather. The challenge coin around her neck seemed to pulse with warmth, though she knew it was just her imagination, the metal absorbing and reflecting her own body heat. "Hi, Daddy," she said softly to the empty air. "I hope you're watching. I hope you saw today." The leaves rustled in the breeze, the only answer nature could provide. "I'm doing what you taught me," she continued. "I'm paying attention. I'm speaking up. I'm protecting people." She smiled, a smile touched with both joy and sorrow. "And I found some pretty good people to do it with." She was quiet for a long moment, listening to the sounds of the night, the distant hum of traffic, the chirping of crickets, the whisper of wind through leaves. "I miss you," she said finally. "I'll always miss you, but I'm okay, Daddy. I'm really okay. And I think you're proud of me. I can feel it." A shooting star streaked across the sky, a brilliant flash of light that was gone almost before it registered. Lily watched its path, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." She sat for a while longer, alone with her thoughts and memories, wrapped in the peace of knowing that she had honored her father's legacy in every way that mattered. Then she rose, stretched, and walked back toward the house where her mother waited. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new ways to make a difference. But tonight she was content to rest in the knowledge that she had found her purpose, her family, her path. And somewhere, somehow, she knew her father was smiling. The years that followed brought changes, as years always do. Lily grew from a child into a young woman, her personality blossoming under the nurturing attention of her extended military family. She excelled in school, driven by the same curiosity and determination that had once led her to watch trucks from behind an ice machine. Her teachers marveled at her maturity, at the quiet confidence she displayed in every situation. Sarah eventually remarried, a widower named Robert, who had lost his own wife to cancer and understood the particular grief of loving someone who was gone but never forgotten. Robert never tried to replace Michael. Instead, he honored his memory, making space in their new family for the man who had come before. Lily called him Rob, never Dad, and both understood why. The gas station continued to serve travelers and locals, its weathered exterior unchanged despite the passage of time. Martha's Gas and Grill still serves travelers and locals alike, still offers fresh coffee and home-cooked meals, still provides a haven for those who need a moment's rest on their journey. The SEAL team members moved on with their careers, some retiring, others continuing to serve. Bobby finally hung up his trident at 58, moving with Patricia to a small house in North Carolina, where he spent his days fishing and his evenings reading to his grandchildren over video calls. Marcus made it to 30 years before stepping back, taking a consulting position that let him use his expertise without the physical demands of field operations. Jake's daughter Emma grew up hearing stories about Lily, about the little girl who had saved her father's life. The two girls eventually met, becoming pen pals and then friends, connected by a bond that neither fully understood but both instinctively cherished. But if you look closely at Martha's Gas and Grill today, you might notice a few additions to the decor. A photograph on the wall, framed in simple wood, showing a group of men in military bearings surrounding a small blonde girl. A newspaper clipping about a sabotage ring brought to justice. A plaque from the State Safety Board, honoring contributions to public welfare. And in the corner, on a small shelf that catches the morning light, a worn mechanic's cap that once belonged to a man named Michael. A man who believed in doing the right thing. A man who taught his daughter to see what others missed. A man whose legacy lives on in every truck that rolls safely down the highway, in every life protected by vigilant eyes, in every child who learns that courage comes in all sizes. Sarah keeps the cap polished and clean, dusting it every morning before she opens the register. Sometimes, when the light is right and the shop is empty, she swears she can smell the combination of motor oil and cologne that once meant Michael was home. She doesn't tell anyone about these moments. Some things are too precious to share. If you stop for gas at Martha's, Sarah will greet you with a smile and a recommendation for the daily special. And if you're lucky, if you happen to visit on the right day, you might see a young woman checking the vehicles in the parking lot with practiced efficiency. She'll notice you watching and offer a wave, her pale blue eyes bright with purpose. Around her neck, a worn challenge coin catches the light. And if you ask her why she does it, why she spends her free time inspecting cars at a small-town gas station, she'll tell you a story. A story about a father who taught her to see, about a group of heroes who taught her to believe, and about a scared little girl who found the courage to speak up, and, in doing so, changed everything. "Check your trucks," she'll say with a knowing smile. "You never know what you might find." And in that moment, as the sun sets over the Virginia hills and the highway stretches endlessly toward the horizon, you might just understand that heroes don't always wear capes or carry weapons. Sometimes they're 7 years old, hiding behind an ice machine, watching and waiting for the moment when their voice will matter most. Sometimes they're there when you need them most, even when you don't know you need them at all. And sometimes the bravest thing anyone can do is simply speak up. Check your trucks. You never know whose life you might save.